Is this on? Can you hear me? Fab. Okay. Thank you so much all for being here. I'm Heine. I'm the president of Women in Politics at IR Society here at Edinburgh, and I'm going to be chairing this panel of fantastic women that we have today. But the other fantastic women is all of you guys. So we have people from Durham, Glasgow, St Andrews, and of course Edinburgh. So thank you all so much for being here and taking time. However, this conference is not only happening here, but it's also happening in London at King's College London. So I think there are about 80 of you lot, and then down in London we have 7 women in politics with about 150 students. So there are a lot of people listening in this afternoon, which is really exciting. And whilst this is a dual conference, what makes this area distinct is that we come from a place that is far from Westminster today, and with that, we have regional issues in politics that are only relevant to this area. So, and that's some of the sort of topics we're going to touch on today. So with that being said, I'm going to introduce our fantastic panel we have this afternoon. And 4 of them are going to be talking about Scottish experiences, and one of them Northern England. So firstly, we have Catriona Munro, who's sitting to my left. Catriona is the Scottish Labour candidate for Edinburgh Southern Western constituency, where she is going to stand in the election in 2026, in the Scottish Parliament elections. Until recently, Catriona practiced as a competition lawyer and held an influential position in the area of policy development. Catriona has chaired the Scottish Fabians for a number of years and is currently a member of the executive of the Fabian Women's Network. And just alongside, we have Elizabeth Scott. Elizabeth is a Liberal Democrat councillor from Durham, and she is serving in the division of Neville's Cross. Elizabeth's main political concerns revolve around inclusive economic growth and local cultural tourism. She's currently on the Local Government Association's Culture, Tourism and Sport Committee, where she works cross-party to shape national policy in this area. And then next we have Fatima Joji. Fatima is an elected councillor for the Scottish National Party who represents the ward of West Hill and District in Aberdeenshire. Fatima has a background in journalism and international development, which has informed her political campaign for a more equitable and inclusive future for an independent Scotland. Fatima has collaborated with campaign groups such as Electa, who you heard this morning, Engender, who you'll hear about this afternoon and also in this panel, and Women for Independence to encourage more active participation for women across politics in Scotland. She hopes one day to represent her home constituency, which is Aberdeenshire West. And then next, we have Noomi Ayananwu. Noomi works for Engender, which is Scotland's leading feminist policy and advocacy organisation, as their Development and Equal Representations Officer. Her role is to increase the number and diversity of women elected and involved in politics in Scotland. Noomi is a human rights activist, an anti-racism trainer, and an intersectional activist with more than 7 years of international experience in this area. Noomi grew up in Austria, where she led the first anti-racism referendum in the country's history, too. And then last, we have Ailsa Heine. Ailsa works as a solicitor for the Law Society of Scotland and its head of international relations. Scottish Devolution saw Ailsa join the Government Legal Service for Scotland. Ailsa's main priorities in Scottish law revolve around environmental protection issues, and she's previously also worked in the areas of animal welfare and food safety. Ailsa has also worked closely alongside Arian Burgess, who unfortunately couldn't join us today, so perhaps can shed light on some similar political outlooks and focuses. So thank you all so much for being here and taking the time. I asked everyone here to consider what it's like to work as a woman in politics beyond Westminster, and now I'm going to ask each panellist to speak for 4 to 5 minutes about this to further introduce their work, any other key moments in their career. And then after this, we're going to open the floor to some Q&As where there'll be some microphones, so get thinking for your questions. Okay, so Catriona, do you want to start us off?
Absolutely. Thank you. Well, I'm not actually working in politics at the moment. I'm campaigning to become a politician, but I've recently retired from being a lawyer, which is equally a very tough environment for women. Politics, of course, is a tough environment for everybody, but it's particularly tough for women. And I suppose in a number of respects. The first is in terms of women putting themselves forward in the first place. And women are less willing to do so without support and encouragement, in my experience. And certainly, speaking for myself, I would not be here today and I wouldn't have put myself forward as a candidate had other people not supported me in doing that and encouraged me to do so. So I would urge you to identify people who might be prepared to do it and support them if you don't yourself want to put yourself forward into active politics. It's just as important to be the supportive team. That's just as valuable if it's not your wish to put yourself forward at this time, then support others. But equally, for those who want to put themselves forward, find others to support you. And then the next stage at which women often struggle is that it's harder to be selected if you're a woman. I think, the evidence suggests that you put a woman against a man in a selection process, even in very forward-looking progressive parties like my own, and even if they're of equal merit, then the man will tend to be more likely to be selected. So you need mechanisms in parties to make it more favourable for women to come forward and be prepared to take that risk. Because it's a horrible thing putting yourself in front of your peer group, in front of the people with whom you work in your party, and ask for their votes. It's actually very hard to do that and requires a lot of self-confidence. And I would say that, again, the support of others is really important. And then finally, of course, if you are fortunate enough to be selected and then elected, the environment in which you operate will be one where it's particularly difficult to be a woman. Social media is crueler to women than it is typically to men, not to say that they don't encounter those challenges themselves, but it is more difficult being a woman in politics, and you need to build those support and defence mechanisms in order to withstand those forces that are ranged against you. But the title of the panel and the question that we were asked was: is it more difficult in Scotland, or is it different in Scotland from anywhere else? Well, actually, I don't really think it is materially so. The Scottish Parliament is in intent more inclusive. Its layout is more inclusive, and less confrontational. The structure of the Parliament, because of the electoral system, is again less confrontational. It is more proportional, and so the atmosphere is perhaps somewhat less braying and aggressive. But politics is a dirty game, and you have to be prepared for that. It's not easy, whether it's Westminster or the Scottish Parliament or indeed local council. All of these environments involve a degree of confrontation that you have to be up for. But I would repeat, my main message is, build those support mechanisms around you. Some of this is about having good role models as well. So there are now many women in politics, and they can help mentor and support you and provide those role models that are really helpful to women in politics. And some of it's about institutional change, better working hours, more childcare, availability of the sorts of support mechanisms institutionally which help women to go into politics. But I think most importantly, it's about your peer group supporting you through that experience and enabling you to fulfill your potential. And that's what we want to achieve by days like this, that you will go out there more confident and able to enter politics as a profession. There are, of course, other organisations like the ones represented here today, Engender and the Elector, which help with that process, as does in my party, the Fabian Women's Network. There's a mentoring scheme, the Jo Cox Leadership Programme. All of these sorts of mechanisms help women to succeed in politics. And if you want to do that, then all of those will provide the sorts of networks that will help you to do so. Thank you.
You could just keep the microphone close to your
Sorry.
Yeah, no.
Okay, hello. So I've had my introduction, but I'll tell you a little bit more about how I came to be in politics. So I was in my mid-40s. I actually did politics for A-level at school. And in my mid-40s, I was a bit tired of hearing myself put the world to rights without actually doing anything about it. And I was invited, actually, by someone who then became a colleague to stand for election in my local area. And my first response was absolutely not. I had 4 teenage children at home at the time, and it just felt like an impossible thing to take on at that stage in my life. And then I said, at the end of, we were having a coffee together, and at the end of that conversation, I said, I'm just going to go away and have a little think about that. And I knew that was it, because by the time I got home, I'd already decided that I would do it. So I spent 4 years as an opposition councillor in County Durham. And then in 2021, the leading group lost control, and the rest of us made up as it's like to be called, a rainbow coalition. So there were Liberal Democrats, Conservatives, Independents and Greens, and we banded together to lead the council. And it was the first time it had been a council of a different political persuasion for over 100 years. So it was quite something in Durham. And our leader was a woman, and we were a cabinet of 10, and 7 men and 3 women, because she's my group leader, so obviously we're both women. But of the other 4 groups, all of the other leaders were men, and their deputies were all men as well. So you kind of get the picture that there is an inherent gender imbalance in most aspects of politics at a local and regional level. And I like the fact that we're talking about Scotland today. It amused me on the train this morning, because it was one of the Scottish newspapers, and they had a big photograph on of the Scottish Sea, excepting it was Seaham in County Durham. So everybody all over the UK thinks that Durham is in Scotland, so I'll just be an adopted Scottish person for the day. So I mean, we do have a lot of economic difficulties in the northeast of England, as you do here, and we had a county council that hadn't had an economic strategy at all for 12 years, and I was determined to change that we needed a direction of travel. And for me, it had to be an inclusive economic strategy, so it had to deal with some of the inherent inequalities around who was coming into certain skill sets in the county and in the region, and how we could promote things better for women and girls, but also all kinds of different groups within society, and that was really important. And we got a lot of other organisations, the university, the FE colleges, other public sector bodies, private sector, behind the strategy, so it didn't belong to the county council. And I genuinely think women are very good at partnership, and that's a sweeping generalisation, but I think we kind of have inherently an inclusive nature to us, and I've kind of always wanted to play to that. I think in terms of getting elected, my experience has been at that sort of local level, I don't think it makes much difference if you're a man or a woman. I think, as you said, getting selected is a very different thing, but getting elected, when you're out on the doorstep talking to people, when you're communicating what your messages are about, I think it doesn't make a huge amount of difference. But when you get into the hierarchy of politics, that is when you start to realise that you are often one woman amongst many men, and you do have to speak louder to have your voice heard. You have to appear smarter. in order to be listened to. And I am the sort of person, I guess, who sees that as a challenge, but it can grind you down too. And so I was very instrumental in getting our North East Combined Authority to become an entity. And we have a female mayor at the lead of that, but most of her cabinet are men. And that just tends to be the way it is. I also mentor for the LGA, the Local Government Association, so I mentor councillors all over the country, and I just hear the same messages, that it is just more of a challenge. And I think getting that support network right, I mean, I certainly couldn't have done what I did with 4 teenagers at home if I didn't have the support of my husband and some very good friends, and having people recognise that because you've got a family does not mean that you are any less valuable and any less able to do your job. You may have to make some different arrangements. You may have to say no sometimes, and that's a really important thing, I think, as well, that women find difficult to say no. No, I don't do meetings at 7 o'clock at night because I'm bathing the kids. You know, that's quite a difficult thing to say. But I think the more we do that, the more we say those things, or whatever the challenges are that you have in life, the easier it becomes for the next person to say it and do it. So I think that's probably all I'll say at this point in time, but I'm interested in the questions and the debate that we have.
Thank you. So my name is Fatima. Hi, everyone. And I completely forgot to mention in my bio that I'm also the SNP candidate for Aberdeenshire West. So I have been selected, and it's an absolute huge honour because it's frankly disappointing that till this day we don't have a single black woman in politics in the Scottish Parliament. So that needs to change. Representation needs to improve. So that's something we're definitely need to work on, all of us in the room. So I think I'll probably come from 2 sides on my experience because I've worked in politics and I'm also elected in office. So I'm now in my early 30s and I entered politics when I was in my mid-20s. And before then, working in journalism and international development, that's where I was. And so I've worked across 3 parliaments, first of all, the European Parliament, Westminster, and now the Scottish Parliament, where I work for an MSP. And I have to say that the whole gender issue, you can see it on both sides. As a member of staff, you can see a lot of gendered inequality, gender problems that we need to address as well. You know, we're looking at environments that weren't really supportive of women working in politics, that it was a system built for men that women had to navigate, were forced to navigate. And if the system was broken, it wasn't the system, it was the women needing to adapt to it, which isn't fair. We were basically set up to, it's a losing battle, basically. So, and I have seen improvements since then. Since I left it, I have seen improvements now. And that is because a lot of women, including you, we're all making our voices heard. And, you know, it's a movement that we need to stand together and change everything. So that's what's changing things, us sticking together as women and really forcing that change. We have to be proactive there. So that's the staffing side of things. And then also being in the front line of politics in elected office. So I was first elected to local government in 2022. So at the age of 29, you can do the math, how old I am now, I don't mind. So I am still the youngest in my council group, in my early 30s, and being elected to local government was quite an eye-opener. I'm saying it's an eye-opener because if you look at me, I have various intersections, so you don't usually see people like me in politics. So there was a lot that I had to deal with in terms of interaction. You know, I think some people have never interacted with someone with so many intersections as I have. I'm black, I'm Muslim, I am visibly Muslim as well, and you know, you've got such an interesting climate. So I had to navigate all that too, and then at the same time try and change things, and then at the same time also be responsible when things go wrong. So it's quite an interesting minefield and quite a roller coaster, but I have to say that there were more ups than downs. And I think what really helped with those ups, and I think this is a really interesting thing, which is why I like the He for She campaign that Emma Watson has been well involved in, is because it just showed how much male allyship was really important for women as well, because men are the glass ceiling and they're more listened to, which is a terrible state of affairs that we are. It is a contemporary state of affairs, but it just goes to show that male allyship is really important. And that's what really helped me in terms of going forward for selection. I had a male ally, I had sort of a male mentor as well. And I have women mentors too, but it just goes to show that having men in your corner is really important, and men really need to take a lot of responsibility and listen to women. I'm going to have to tell them that straight, so because we know what we're talking about and we do have opinions that are valid and that matter. And I think sometimes we forget that in a society where make up more than 50% of the population, we are underrepresented in terms of having our voices heard. And that's why policy tends to fail a lot, and I think people overlook that aspect. So, you know, you had to deal with all these various intersections and, you know, how they interact with someone with my background. And so in deciding to, you know, work with various organizations like Engender, I've met Noomi for the first time in person now, but I've met her online, which is why these events are great. Not only do I advocate for more women in politics, I advocate for diversity among women as well. That's really important. We can't just stop at having more women. And at the same time, we can't just stop at numbers as well. We really need to look at the hierarchy. We really need to look at the system, because as a staffer, I noticed that a lot of the men were in higher positions than women were. And in politics, even within our local government council, you see a lot of the men take the higher senior positions, which really reinforces the gender pay gap. You'll see the men are mostly the chairs. They'll be the ones who are in charge of the meatier, more important committees, where women will be relegated to, like, you know, the education and the poverty, you know, just the very niche ones. So that really needs to change as well. You know, women are very capable of speaking on economics. Women are very capable of speaking on, you know, even defense, but, you know, sometimes we find ourselves relegated to the positions of, you know, women's issues, women and inequality, which is really important as well. But we forget that our lives also intersect in various, you know, sectors and areas of our public life. So that's just a really scattered background of what I'm doing here. And I think in terms of staying in politics as well, this is advice I give to every young woman in politics, because our minds can be impressionable. You'll get so much conflicting advice when you're in politics as well. I mean, I've been told, you know, be passionate, but don't appear emotional. And, you know, if you appear emotional, then it's your fault, even if you're not. And, you know, be confident, but don't appear arrogant. But then the default is to make us seem arrogant if we're confident. So you can't win. And, you know, it's sort of things like that. And that's why there's this really, I'm going to quote a film here. So Barbie, there was a brilliant line in Barbie, and that whole speech about, you know, be this, be that, but not this, not that. That was brilliant, because it really captured, I think, our life in general and what we need to navigate. So I think what I'm trying to say with this example is you're going to receive conflicting advice, and just stay true to what you are doing and be who you are in politics, because at the end of the day, that's what's going to, you know, why you've entered politics in the first place, whether you're in the background or in the front line, and it's really important that you continue with your values in place as well. So thank you.
Thank you so much. Also, thank you for the really interesting kind of comments up until now. I'm also really happy to be here, so thanks for the invite. Hello, my name is Noomi. I work for Engender Scotland, which was mentioned a couple of times now. And yeah, I guess I'm not a politician, so I think us two bring a bit of like a different perspective, which I think is also super interesting for maybe any of you that don't want to be politicians but still want to work in politics. So yeah, my background, Heine already mentioned. I grew up in Austria, and I started with politics when I was 15. So I actually started more with like party politics. I was in the youth parliament, and I was really active in like a youth organization from a party in Austria, and I learned a lot. It was super stressful, and I really liked it, but I did learn that party politics isn't for me. So when I was 19, I started campaigning for anti-racism, because that was what I was most passionate about, and intersectionality, especially looking at anti-racism, but looking at like the most also vulnerable people within that. So definitely like women, feminism, anti-racism, that was like my themes that I really quickly established. So yeah, I started my own nonprofit, and I started campaigning in that direction, and that was like where I found like, okay, that's my passion. And yeah, when I moved here, I studied human rights and diplomacy, so not too far away from probably what most of you studied. And then I started working at Engender, which has been great and which is very different from party politics, but still very close. As Fatima mentioned, I work with a lot of politicians together, and it's super interesting to see that connection. And I think some of you mentioned it today on the panel as well, to have kind of a support network as people that work in politics. It's a super stressful environment anyway, no matter who you are. But if you're a person that has multiple intersections, if you're a woman, that can be even more stressful. So for me, right now, I definitely learned and found that working in the third sector and doing policy and advocacy is something that I'm super passionate about. So I can give a bit of more insight what that means and what that looks like, what a job like that could be. I work on the project Equal Representation in Politics. What I mostly do is try to get more women, more diverse women into politics, but also make them want to stay there. Because we also know that very often women get elected, but then they're in the parliament, they're in the council, and it's just horrible. It's not a good environment. So after a term, or maybe even earlier, they just leave. So that's also not what we want. We want women to be welcome and to feel like they can do their job and be active for the constituents and do what they want to do. So that's part of my job. So it's kind of a mix between research, policy, and advocacy. So my day-to-day looks like meeting with politicians, meeting with political parties, setting out recommendations which are policy-based, but also based out of lived realities. That's why working with councillors and MSPs and MPs is so important as well. So one kind of strand also how Fatima and I work together with other councillors is that we run an advisory group, which is a group made out of councillors all over Scotland, and we meet with them regularly just to set out our research, our recommendations, and see if what we're trying to demand is something that also kind of grasps into the realities. So for example, if we say, I'm trying not to get too policy and too techie because I'll bore you, but if, for example, we see in councils, 90% of the women that we asked have said that they've experienced abuse and harassment, and also in a gendered way, in this sexual harassment, for example. So what would be a recommendation that would be important for us to put into a report, to go to politicians and say, hey, can you please do that? So that's what we meet with. For example, I'll use an example because you're sitting next to me, but we go to Fatima and we're like, hey, Fatima, this is the research. Is that something that you also think is your lived experience, and do these recommendations make sense? So that's one part that we do. Another kind of project I lead is called the Equal Representation Coalition. That's a coalition that's made out of different organizations throughout the third sector. Elector, who we've met today, is also in that coalition, and various different organizations. And we work on similar things. One project that we developed is a toolkit. So you can access that on the website. It's called Equal Representation. That's it. And it's the Equal Representation Toolkit. And it's a toolkit for political parties to kind of have tools, develop tools, how to increase women's representation within their party, but also make that lasting change. Also something that was mentioned, it's not only about numbers, but also how do we change the system? How do we change the culture within the party? How do we make everybody understand that increasing women's representation is not the women's job, it's everybody's job, because we can't get there if only the marginalized people are fighting for it. We need the people in power to also see that it's their responsibility. So if a politician, for example, thinks, okay, I want to do something, but I have no idea where to start, they can go on the website, look at the toolkit, put in the information, for example. Do we have, how does our vetting processes work? Do we have a diverse panel who selects the candidates? All of these different things, and at the end of it, they get a set of recommendations how they can improve their political party. So that's some of the things I do and some of the projects I work on. Also this past summer, a very big report that we brought out was about women's political journey. We did a really extensive research with over 160 politicians from all over the UK. It was councillors, MSPs, and MPs. And we asked them how they're doing, how is it to be a woman and a politician in the UK? And would you recommend it to others? Do you like it? If not, why do you not like it? And I think one of the kind of starkest findings that we found is something that I mentioned earlier as well. But we heard that 70% of the people that we asked said that they have experienced abuse, especially online. So that's a lot of women that are in politics. and only 11% have said that they felt safe during their campaigning. So that's, in my head, nearly nobody. I mean, that's like an unacceptable number to say that only 10%, around 10% of women felt safe campaigning, just wanting to represent their constituents or just wanting to be passionate about what they're passionate about. So yeah, we definitely don't want to settle for this, and I think that's why I do what I do. So if you're interested in working in politics and kind of changing the system, but not in the standard way of like being an MSP, there's so many routes and so many ways to get active and to be involved. It can be campaigning, it can be in a third sector environment, or I'm sure you will also tell us a few other ways how you can do that. But yeah, I think only being here is like the right step and the right way, and there's so many women next to us, next to you as well, that you can talk to and that you can build a network with. Because I think the most important message that I've learned is that your network that you're building is not like up there, it's like next to you, left and right. That's the women that will stick to you, that's the women that will go through with your journey. So keep your eyes open, build relationships here, now, today, and yeah, so great that you're already here.
Thank you. Hello, can everyone hear me okay? Yeah. Thanks very much, Heine, for the introduction. As Heine said, I currently work for the Government Legal Service for Scotland. When I qualified as a solicitor, I worked in private practice for a number of years, and I knew that was not really the line of work that I wanted to continue in. I wanted to be more in a public sector, government environment. For a while, I also worked at the Law Society of Scotland, dealing with their international relations. And then shortly after devolution, I joined the Government Legal Service. And it's maybe helpful if I just explain what the Government Legal Service for Scotland is. So it provides lawyers for a number of government offices within Scotland. So, for example, one of the biggest offices is the Scottish Government Legal Directorate, which is where I currently work. But we also provide lawyers for the Office of the Advocate General for Scotland, which is the part of the UK government that advises the UK government on Scottish legal matters. We also provide lawyers for Revenue Scotland, for the Scottish Law Commission, also for some of the public inquiries that are ongoing at the moment. So there are a variety of offices within that umbrella organisation. So we move around those offices. We're encouraged to apply for postings in other offices. Also within the offices, we move around posts. So for example, within the Scottish Government Legal Directorate, I have worked in a number of different policy areas covered by the Scottish Government. So that's a little bit of sort of background that's maybe helpful in explaining. The other thing that I should say, and it's important, as Noomi said as well, so obviously politicians on this panel, I'm not in active politics, and that's because as a member of the Government Legal Service, I am also a civil servant, and we, as civil servants, we support the government in implementing and developing policies, but one of the key and core values of the civil service is that we are required to provide impartial and objective advice to any government, whichever political persuasion. So at the moment, I am in the Scottish Government. We advise the SNP administration. Obviously, we've got our elections coming up. So if that administration changes, we will advise the next administration. The government does employ political advisors as well, called special advisors, and they provide the political advice to the government that civil servants can't provide. So yeah, I think, as I think picking up on what Catriona said, I think it is, if you don't want to be in frontline politics, then there are, a number of other roles within Scotland or elsewhere where you can be involved in government, law, politics, without actually being involved in active politics. So maybe I was just going to say a little bit about what we do, sort of on a day-to-day basis as a lawyer in government. So we're advising on a whole host of legal issues that affect the government, but a lot of our work relates to the development of legislation, and sometimes, obviously, as the government comes in with a manifesto, and then they turn that into a sort of programme for government. and develop policies from that. And we give advice on, if there's legislation required for those to develop those policies. Some of them, they can introduce policies without legislation. Other times they need new legislation. That might be primary legislation or secondary legislation. And the lawyers are closely involved in all of that work. So the solicitors like myself, we draft the secondary legislation, and we work with Parliamentary Council in drafting the primary legislation as well. And all of that legislation has to be scrutinised by the Scottish Parliament, and we, as lawyers in the government, along with the policy officials, we provide support to the government ministers in dealing with that legislation. So each piece of legislation has to go through some kind of parliamentary scrutiny, and so we support ministers when they appear before Parliament or before parliamentary committees, and that often involves answering questions from the committees. Sometimes those can be quite rigorous questions. So that's quite an interesting part of the job. You're interacting a lot with the Parliament, dealing with questions from the politicians who are holding the government to account. And the minister deals with the political questions, and policy and legal officials deal with the sort of other, can deal with the more technical side of it. In terms of my experience working in the government, I have a lot of female colleagues. There are a lot of women employed in the government legal service. Now, that might have something to do with the fact that, as Catriona said, private practice can be quite challenging for women, and I think there are quite a lot of women attracted to the government work. I mean, partly the interesting range of work that we get, but also the government has a lot of favourable policies, diversity and inclusion policies, part-time working policies, flexible working policies, making it, I think probably easier for women to work in a public sector organisation than in private practice. Sometimes, not all of private practice firms. So mine is fairly positive experience of working in that environment. Also, at the moment, we do have a lot of government ministers who are female as well. I think that makes a difference in terms of we're not working with only male ministers. That may have been the case in the past. We also had a female first minister, so that I think has quite an impact on our organisation as a whole. So overall, I would say a positive experience. It's quite different, I think, from some of the other experiences that we've talked about in terms of active politicians. So I think that's all I'm going to say at the moment. I'm happy to answer any questions.
That's great. Thank you all so much for those remarks. So now we're going to open up to the questions from the floor. Claire and Julie are going to hand around the microphones. Just a reminder, this is being live streamed. And when you do have a question, please, can you say your name, the university that you're from, keep your question nice and concise, and also say who your question's for. It can be for all of them or just one of them. So yeah, does anyone have a question for any of the panelists? Oh, at the back.
Hi everyone. Is that on? It's okay. I have a loud voice. Oh, I can hear it now. Hi everyone. Thanks very much for a great panel. We really enjoyed it, obviously. I'm Petra. I'm from St Andrews Women in Politics. And this is a question for everyone, but I mean, if you don't have an answer, obviously that's understandable. But I was wondering if there were any political female figures, or sorry, just any female figures in your respective fields, whether it be law, policy advocacy, or politics itself, which particularly inspired you into your field. Thank you.
I'm 100% going to say Nicola Sturgeon. She really inspired me to enter politics, and particularly the SNP as well. I don't read really need a lot of convincing, but she really took the whole way. And I think it's a deliberate policy initiative on her part that she led the first gender balanced government. So I think it just goes to show that you need to be really deliberate with your actions as well. She was very clear on that as well, and it has really changed, I think, the landscape and how we view women in politics, because I think she was a particularly strong leader. So very short. Yeah, Nicola Sturgeon, I really look up to her.
Can I have two? Is that working? Can I have two really quick ones? Because one of them is Mo Molam, who, when I was fairly young, I just found her strength of character, her ability to cut through. She was a Durham University student as well, and was apparently quite a character. We're about to put up a blue plaque for her in Durham, so she really did inspire me when I was young. When I was older, and my political colleagues would be horrified at me saying this, but I got diagnosed with type 1 diabetes in later life when Theresa May was the Prime Minister. And the fact that she was the Prime Minister of the country with type 1 diabetes, I just thought, well, if she can do that, I can kind of do anything. So she was another one, but for very different reasons.
I think Mo Molam is a great pick, actually, and she would definitely be up there for me as well, as someone who managed to secure the Northern Ireland agreement in circumstances which many wouldn't. She just knocked heads together and got people to talk to people that would otherwise just simply not have been able to converse in the same room. So yeah, good pick. But I would also like to choose Harriet Harman, who was a real trailblazer, and she had young children, taking them into Parliament. I think when she arrived in Parliament, she found that she had to share a room with, loads of other people, and that they were just relegated to a sort of cupboard in the depths of Westminster, as women who didn't really matter. Things have changed, and the environment is much better. It's far from perfect, but definitely things are better than they were when she first entered Parliament. And finally, just a quick one, Jenny Lee, who was a trailblazer as well of an earlier generation, and also, operated as a woman in Parliament with very, very few other women around her to support her. They did not have the support mechanisms that women today have.
Thank you. Does anyone else have a question?
Hi, I'm Amelia from Durham Whips, and my question is, I know not always, but often politics can be quite a male-dominated space, and I don't know if you have any advice for sort of your young female politicians who are looking to enter that space.
Would you like to ask that to anyone in particular, or okay? Why don't we? Does anyone else answer this?
Judy, me too. I think we need to ask the politicians.
Do the politicians want to answer it?
Maybe start with helping people.
Yeah, I guess. I guess your question is like, you want to be a politician?
Or just in the space?
Yeah, I can, from the perspective of helping politicians, or helping whoever figures that like on frontline politicians. It could be like also the face of a campaign or something. That's also people that you know really well and that I've been before as well. I think having a support network is super important with whatever obstacles you may face, especially if it's like discrimination. Having like people you can rely on and people that support you. Also sometimes people you can vent to, like this just happened, can I just let it all out? But also have people support you in how to navigate hard situations. I think that for me that has always been the number one help.
I think what helped me, this is a personal experience, so I think, I absolutely looked for a support network. I joined Electors Peer Circle group. I was in cohort 6, I think. And the good thing about it is that I was in a group with people like from different political persuasions and, different ages, different backgrounds. And I think that was enriching and really supportive. We had different experiences we can share, as well as, I think that was really important. And I've kept in touch with quite a few of them as well till this date. So you make lifelong friends if you get that sort of, peer circle going. So that's really important. You know, a lot of groups do that. Elector, Engender, Women 50-50, 50-50 Parliament. I would absolutely look at the sort of resources that they have out there to help you get started. I also think that, I know not everyone can do it and it can be quite daunting, but I think networking is really good as well. You know, just speaking with people, you know, making friendship with people from different backgrounds. It doesn't just have to be women, but networking is a brilliant way for you to have that support to fall back on. Because, you know, I make friends with 5 people, then they introduce me to another 5 of their friends. Before I know, I'm friends with 10. And, you know, it's just, you get to know so many people and you get support that way. So yeah, networking and, you know, looking at what organizations like Engender, Elector, 50-50 Parliament, Women 50-50 do.
Yeah, slightly different take on it, I guess. I think shifting the way that we think about power, I think power is often perceived as a bit of a negative thing. But thinking about power as being getting yourself to a place where you can engender change, and really thinking about how you do that once you've achieved a position of power, at whatever level that is, it is really, really important. I think women very often get to a position and then don't do anything about all of the obstacles that they've had to face whilst getting to that position. So, and that's not just politics. I think that happens in all lines of work. So I think we just have to be a bit more thoughtful about what power means and what positive things you can use it for.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. And I think actually I was really shocked by the way that Kemi Badenoch dealt with Rachel Reeves's budget earlier in the week. You know, for a woman to berate another woman in the way that she did, it was really awful, and it just shouldn't happen. We should be trying to encourage a more caring and more inclusive politics, not one where we join in the braying against a woman who's trying to do a really tough job and actually did a pretty good job of what she put forward. So I thought that was demonstrative that the world has not changed and that it's still tougher for women in politics. But I mean, I do strongly advise people to engage with the organisations that have been alluded to and others within specific parties, because men have typically ready-made networks. Women have to make an effort to create those networks and those support mechanisms. And the sooner you start on that journey to finding the people you can trust, the people who will support you, the people who believe in you, and you might not believe in yourself, but others believe in you, and that encourages you. So, create those networks, create those support mechanisms, and you'll make it.
Does anyone else have a question? We'll go to you first.
When trying to get started in this kind of field, it can be quite daunting as a woman because you feel like you need to be set to a higher standard or have more experience in education or just in general life experiences. How would you say is the best way to start to equip yourself? Because it's difficult to find practical and transferable experience, particularly from an international perspective, but just in any way possible, would you say is a good place to start?
Do you have anyone in particular? And also, what's your name and your university?
I'm Sarah Williams from Glasgow University, but particularly from the international perspective and from rights advocacy.
Is that for Ailsa or yeah?
I think when you posed the question, I thought of application processes, which is really annoying and really hard. The job market is really hard right now, and it's always also obviously been harder for women or more people with intersecting identities. I think for applications specifically, I think you just fake it till you make it. But also believe that you can do more than you think you can. We also know that men typically apply to a job even if they only have 50% of the criteria, but women wait until they have 80%. I think once I learned this, I was like, okay, I'm just going to apply to anything. And it worked. I'm an Engender now, and I also know that I'm here because I have earned it, and I'm like, I know that what I do, like I'm capable of doing it. And I think to have that confidence is really, really important. And other people will also see that confidence, and it will definitely help on your way. Internationally, I think learning how to transfer your skills is really important. I think even if you don't have any experience in politics, if you've worked, like, for example, as a barista, but you want to enter politics, there's so many transferable skills you've learned, like time management and like social skills and stakeholder management. Like if you have an annoying customer and you have to like kind of deal with them, that's a really important skill. That's stakeholder management. You just need to know how to like phrase it in a way that appeals to the job that you want to apply to. So I think for international like experiences that definitely help, because sometimes when you want to start working in a different country, the system is very, very, very different and you don't know how to navigate that. But that is definitely like one thing that helped me. And also just to know where to find opportunities is really hard. So I think there's so many like newsletters and organizations and all of that you can sign up to. All the like big NGOs mostly have a newsletter. If you just sign up to that, they mostly post jobs or they post other resources that really help just to get to know the landscape of like whatever country I'm in right now and see who are the people and who can I like reach out to. Before I came to the UK, I really didn't really have LinkedIn, but I know it's really important here, so now I do, and it has helped. So I think probably people have told you this before, but LinkedIn is so important. And I know sometimes in my studies, my colleagues and a lot of us struggled with this aspect of like networking and presenting yourself and all these things, because I've heard so many times it sometimes feels superficial or fake. And if you're someone that struggles with that, not every networking has to be fake. Just because you want to get to know someone because of something doesn't mean that you're not genuinely interested in them. So if I talk to you because I would like to know your job and maybe you can help me out with something, doesn't mean that I'm doing it because I'm fake. So also like to change your mindset to be like, I want to talk to you because I'm genuinely interested and maybe we have something in common and maybe we can work together. That was something that I think a lot of my colleagues at university struggled with. But again, the network is like right around you, like left and right. So just focus on that, and transferable skills, very, very, very important.
Thanks. I can only really speak for the sort of government recruitment policies and processes. If you're interested in sort of more of a sort of away from frontline politics, but the government for the civil service operates an open recruitment policy. It's testing for various skills. It can be a little bit of a tricky process to sort of understand what's being looked for, but I think it doesn't. If you understand the process, then you are able to present your skills. They're looking for certain skills, not for certain people. And it may be worth saying as well, the Scottish Parliament also employs a lot of staff as well. If you're looking for more of a kind of role in the Parliament away from the front line, and they also have an open recruitment policy with sort of fair and open competition for all posts.
I think because your question touched on actually getting active in the front line as well, I think I'll look at the thought process, and I think I'll probably advise in like 3 steps. So I think the first thing, we can be overly critical about our own abilities. You mentioned that you feel like you have to be this and that, So I think the first step is, be kind to yourself. The second step, electors say this all the time, if you care, you're qualified, go for it. And that's where they're talking about the application process. Just do it. Don't let your thoughts talk you away from it. And, there is experience in applying and not passing around the first time. I think if you want to stand in the front line, you're not always going to get it the first time round. So if you try and wait till when you think you're sure you're going to get it, you're going to spend longer doing that. This is my 3rd contest, and I've won on the 3rd contest. So I tried the first time, didn't get put off. Second time, so it's 3rd. So I just went for it, and I got experience from that, and I improved. So there's something there. And I think the final thing is, put your skills on a friend and just think, what would you tell her? Would you say, don't bother? you'd likely encourage her. So, flip that advice on yourself. So I would say that.
Just something about leadership, because it doesn't really matter in what kind of forum you take a leadership role. It's great for your experience, for your CV, but also for your personal confidence. So I think in a voluntary capacity, in a society or a club, any sort of leadership role will help advance you in terms of how you think about yourself as well. And I do think there's a big mindset thing, in the same way as you don't get fit reading about going to the gym. You don't get that inner confidence from thinking about it and speculating about it. You've got to put yourself in really uncomfortable positions and think, actually, I did that. I'm pretty good.
Thanks. Yeah, I would say don't set your expectations too high. Like you, this is not my first rodeo. I have tried to be selected before. I stood for an unwinnable seat about 20 years ago. It was a fantastic experience and gives you credibility. So even if you don't win your ideal selection in your own home seat, in a winnable seat, that's fine. Do something. Fight an unwinnable seat to get the experience, show that you're a credible candidate, and then come back to it. That's absolutely fine, and there are other opportunities. And I suppose in that process, take as much from it as you possibly can, soak it up, learn from the experience, and show that you're doing so. And then next time round, you'll have a much more credible story to tell about what you did in the seat where you ran before. Even though you didn't win, you learned a lot about campaigning. Campaigning is complex and tough, and the more you know about it, the better prepared you'll be. So as well as having something to say during the selection. If you've tried before, try again. I think there's a film about Margaret Thatcher called The Long Road to Finchley. Now, she's definitely not one of my role models. However, the film is interesting. It was amazing how many selections she went to before she was actually selected. I mean, obviously in an environment where women in politics, and particularly in the Conservative Party, were a rarity, but nevertheless, it tells a story that is still relevant today.
Thank you so much. Do we have any more questions? Should we get this side? Yeah, just go for it.
I'm Judah. I'm from Durham University. My question is directed at everyone, but it's something that Fatima mentioned specifically in the introduction, which was that this idea of allyship and the importance of allyship. And my question is, do you have any advice for how we can create those allies and how we can convince people to care about issues that do not personally affect them?
Do you want to start us off then, Fatima?
I'm genuinely of the opinion that every issue affects you in a roundabout way, whether directly or indirectly. So I think you'll always find a point there, be it, it can be something just, a woman's experience in politics, for example. You're saying, okay, you feel that a woman is not qualified to be a politician, if that's coming from a man, but then they'll say, okay, but you trust her to raise your children with opinions, etc. It's just, maybe that's not a great example, but you will find something there that will affect people. I don't agree with the sense that not everything will affect you. It will, especially when it comes to policy making, because it's for everyone. So that will impact people. And in terms of, building that allyship, that network, I think I put a lot of responsibility on political parties to lead the way. Because, political parties are the ones choosing their candidates. They're the ones trying to sell their candidates on the door as well. And I think internally you need to really deal with the, prejudice and the bias that might sometimes arise during selection contests. So it's really important that you deal internally, political parties, that you deal with that. And that's why creating groups is really important. Like, for example, within the SNP, we have various groups that we call them affiliate groups that provide allyship. So, for example, we have the BAME network, we have the Disabled Members Network, we have the LGBT plus network, and you'll see all these affiliates coming together to, you know, provide allyship to each other and women's group as well. So, you know, that's really important that we start internally. But I am of the opinion that, you know, everything we do in life is going to affect you. You're going to be impacted by it one way or the other. So, yeah.
We've only got 10 minutes left. So does anyone else?
Can I just add one? Oh, go on.
Just very quickly, I think also from a campaigning policy perspective, the way you frame issues. So, for example, I like to say not only 35% of women are councillors in Scotland, it's like 65% of councillors are men. They're overrepresented. What can we do about it, men? Or like, you know, just to frame it in a different way, that you can do that with any issue. You can say, you don't have to say, oh, disabled people have this and that. We can be like, what can like able-bodied people do to support them? So I think just the framing is really important. And I mean, sometimes, very often in my experience, you can really get people to care in that way.
And just very quickly on networking, I prefer when you're a politician, your job is to help people, really, at the end of the day. So when networking, I think it's more about what you can do for other people than what they can do for you. I mean, obviously, your ultimate objective is what they can do for you. But where it starts is what you can do for them and how you can help them with whatever it is. So I think that's just a way of looking at it.
Thank you so much. Does anyone else have a question? Should we go to the front? Yeah.
Thank you. My name is Annette and I'm from Durham. It was a brilliant panel. Thank you so much. And I got like all the ideas of how women can suffer any kind of discrimination, segregation through the work. But there's also the case when women are in leadership positions and then they don't actually have this gender perspective into policy making, or they don't actually stand in an intersectional way for all the people that they are representing too. So yeah, I just want to know what's your perspective in your like behalf. How will you ensure that all the voices of all kind of women are heard in the parliament, in the legislation, or in the lawmaking?
Would you like to direct that at anyone in particular, or Catriona?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's absolutely our obligation to speak up and to be vocal about issues which particularly affect women, and because they've been underrepresented for millennia. So absolutely, it is our duty. But as has been said, you know, trying to encourage men to have that perspective and understand that perspective is also really important. And, you know, we're more likely to get to where we need to be if everybody is allied behind us.
Yeah, I was brought up believing that gentlemen always held the door open. And that absolutely makes me scream on the inside when I think about it. But I don't think we've got to a point where women always hold the door open. I mean that metaphorically. And I think we all have an obligation in that respect.
No, exactly. And I think you did raise an example, you know, of Kemi and Rachel Reeves. Without putting my political perspective on it, you know, I think that just goes to show that we can also tear each other down. And that's why I think in my introduction I mentioned that I lay a lot of emphasis on diversity amongst women. It's not enough to just have, you know, just one set of women, you know, able-bodied women. You know, you need disabled women as well, because that's really important, because it enriches our policy that way. So you need that diversity among women, and, you know, enough of pulling up the ladder. And I think another thing as well that I really want, because I think I felt Margaret Thatcher was guilty for this, is feeling that you have to be a guy, like act like the guys, to be part of the guys club, to the point that you actually discriminate against women just to be liked by, you know, the men because of the field you're in. I don't think that's the way to go about it at all. So I think there's, you know, that we really need to look at how we behave as well, whether we are, you know, reinforcing the boys club just to try and be part of it, that sort of thing. So I think we really need to look away from that. That's not the way you feel you need to succeed. So, yeah.
It's really annoying when that happens, when you feel like you're in a room and you're like, oh yeah, we're all women, but then you feel like there's some kind of energy coming off from like what you just mentioned, right? And I feel like in some ways it's understandable if we're in a system that rewards that kind of energy, tearing each other down no matter where you are. But I think that's why it's so important for us to like fight against that and also hold each other accountable. I think from a strategic perspective, if you want someone to care about an issue, but you feel like they're maybe a bit too far away, or for them that's like, oh, that's a bit too much, I don't want to care about this. I mean, getting women to politics is actually quite a good starting point. A lot of people actually think that's important, like across the political spectrum. I also have to work with like all political parties, no matter like what I believe in, but trying to convince people to get more women to politics, that often works, and I think that opens the door for whatever you want to say next. So I think trying to find something where you think a lot of people can agree on and then to build on that, that mostly helps in my work.
I think, from my point of view, we're advising the government, but one of the important roles that we have is in making sure that the government complies with its equality duties, and for each piece of legislation or each policy, there are various legal requirements about equality impact assessments. So, one of the things that we do as lawyers is ensuring that the government is taking its equality duties into account in preparing policies and legislation. So, yeah, that's an important factor for us to take into account.
Thank you so much. Do we have a final question, since we only have a few minutes left? What about just you there?
Hi, my name is Rebecca from the University of Glasgow. I had a question that's maybe more directed towards Fatima, but is open to anyone. So I was just wondering, I think as someone with an immigrant parent, someone with that sort of experience, I think the political sphere, especially within the UK, can be especially daunting. I was just wondering, you mentioned how you felt like in the past you've sort of been navigating through a minefield just because of your experience with intersectionality. I was wondering how that differed because you mentioned in the European politics, in Scottish politics. I was wondering how that sort of experience was different, and also if you had any advice, just because of how I think scary it can be.
I think the fact that the European Parliament was really diverse helped. So I think that was one of the best experiences I had. And I think that just goes to show why diversity is really important, to make you feel comfortable in an environment. Because the European Parliament, you're looking at different countries. When I walked in, I would hear people speaking French, German, Italian. It's just just so many different languages. And that really helped settle me in, saying, okay, we've got different experiences there. So I think that really helped navigate, and that's why it's really important that we adhere to things like public sector equality duties. As a councillor, it's part of my code of conduct in the public sector equality duty to foster great relations between groups that share certain characteristics and those who don't. And I think that's something really important that we have to uphold there as well. So that's something that comes from leadership as well. But then at the same time, why it's really, really important that we promote diversity and inclusion, because that creates an environment that makes it easy for us to navigate. And, I think some people, because they haven't met someone who doesn't look like them, or, I think they'll come in with, prejudice or preconceived notions as well. So just meeting different people, that really exposes people to different ideas. And I think that also comes down to education as well. That's why I'm really interested in the way that we teach our curriculum as well. Like I always say, to decolonize it, because I think the prejudice starts from there. You don't know someone, you don't know what they look like. So your first assumption is they look different from me. There's going to be something negative that goes through my head first of all. So, we really need to work on these sort of policies. It is a policy on leadership response that I'm sharing with you, but it really does enrich someone's experiences there. So, and if not, networking is really, I always go back to networking, just make friends with, different people, and it does really help. Oh, okay. Yeah. No?
Thank you so much. And thank you so much to everyone for coming, both panelists and attendees. It's been so wonderful. Let's just all give them a big round of applause. And we just have something small to give you all as a thank you for coming in for free and traveling. Yeah, I hope you enjoyed that and you took something away, whatever that was. And now we have about 15 minutes until the next workshop. So you can go downstairs, get a refreshment, and the workshop will be happening in the Cabaret Bar, the same place as the morning. So thank you, everyone.